What's up, everybody? Welcome to the PickSix podcast, CBS Sports daily NFL podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. It is Saturday, June the 26th, and we're going to break some top 10 offensive linemen. By the way, happy birthday to me. We record these early, so it's not actually my birthday, but happy birthday. Happy early birthday to me. Joining us to break it down, Tyler Sullivan. Sully, what's up, buddy? Happy birthday.
Oh, well, happy birthday. And what better gift than to rank offensive linemen? I'm sure this is what you wanted.
Yeah, and surprise for you, a little surprise birthday present. Since I'm turning 40 today as we record this, we're actually going to ask you for your top 40 offensive linemen in the NFL. We're going to list them one by one and go through the biggest traits and all that. Now, we were talking a little bit beforehand about ranking offensive linemen. It is not, look, you can watch as much film as you want. You can study with you can learn about offensive line play all you want. But the people who you really need to be a former offensive lineman, or you need to be a coach for the team whose offensive lineman you are grading, because the way that offensive lines work, this is not like basketball or baseball, where there's an easily assignable flaw to like we can tell who a really good or a really bad offensive lineman is, but the nuances are tough. So you had a tough assignment. You ranked the top 10 offensive tackles and the top 10 interior offensive linemen. We're going to go through them, and you did a heck of a job, all things considered. So nice work by you.
Thanks. It's so, you'll read this list and it's all the guys that are probably supposed to be on there. I mean, we'll talk about probably the guys that just missed, and they're certainly, should be considered elite and all of that. We can identify who's elite. It's actually harder when you get into this top 10 and you're trying to figure out, okay, why put this guy over that guy? Who is actually the top tackle or top interior lineman in the league? It's when you start to split hairs between all of these guys. That's when it gets really difficult, like you were saying.
Well, and we did top defensive lineman with Jared Dubin. I think maybe that one might not even be up yet. But the point being is that even then, you get Cam Hayward, gets in your Twitter mentions like, oh, I'm number 6. It's like, well, I mean, I'm not saying you're bad.
Right. I mean, all of these guys that are on here, and even the ones that are on the just missed, I totally understand why you would be miffed is why I don't rank you in the top 10, but you are certainly still in a class of your own when it comes to offensive line play. It's not one of these positions too where it's like, all right, there's one quarterback, there's multiple guys on, multiple starters. It's a lot to unpack.
Right tackles become not as important as left tackle, but it's up there. It is an absolutely necessary position. I mean, right tackle is very important because of the way that defenses move around pass rushers, because teams sometimes will have, like you look at the Chargers when they had Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa, you can't just block Bosa or block Ingram. You need multiple. Plus, the other thing that matters, sometimes you have quarterbacks who like to scramble, quarterbacks who like to run around and hold the ball. Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson. Sometimes you have pocket passers like Tom Brady. And so the value and the importance of different positions for different teams matters even more because of those different quarterbacks.
Absolutely. And the other thing too is, with this list, and it's really two lists. If you look at the article, it's top 10 tackles, top 10 interior linemen. I did try to add a little bit of like diversity to it as well. I didn't just go, okay, I'm only looking at left tackles here and just going on that side. And I wasn't just looking at left guards or right guards and centers. I tried to have each position well represented as we went through as well. So yes, there might be a left guard that maybe is missed on the interior list, but that's because I'm probably bumping up a center or a right guard that's premier at his position as well. So that's kind of where we're at.
Look, again, the point being, it's a very difficult list to do. Sure. And so I'm not going to sit here and rip you like, Garrett Bowles at 10, you loser.
Let's do it.
Garrett Bowles is 10, though. I will say the guys who just missed, I could see some chirps coming your way.
Oh, absolutely. I'm surprised Debo hasn't already gotten at me with Lane Johnson or something like that.
Well, Lane Johnson did not make the list. That's not a spoiler because we're telling you that. Who was the person you were most scared to leave off of this list? By the way, Lane Johnson's a monster, but he is getting a little bit older. He is 31 now. He played in 19 games the last 2 years, and not that his play has declined, but when you get older, you got health issues, that becomes a concern. I mean, it's hard to put a guy who played 7 games last year on the top 10 tackle list when it does appear, at least to me, Sully, that we're sort of turning a corner in offensive line development. Like there's a lot of younger, we saw that class in 2020 and Tristan Wirfs, Mekhi Becton, who didn't make the list. A good group of young tackles come in and make an impact right away, and that bodes well for the future. Like, this list is a little more robust than it's been in years past, I think.
Oh, for sure, and it's only going to get a little bit more difficult as we go on. I mean, if Penei Sewell is who we all think he's going to be, he's someone who's going to be in contention next year, and so that was a little tough trying to find these young guys that are coming in. I mean, there's one, rising second-year player that's on this list that we'll probably talk about in a few minutes. But that was probably the hardest part. It wasn't really like, all right, who am I going to get chirped the most about? If anything, that was more with the interior lineman. That was a little bit more difficult. But for me, one name, and I know, I'm from New England. I'm a Patriots guy and all that. Isaiah Wynn was really hard to kind of figure out for me. And one, because I see him up close. I'm there every home game for New England. I see him probably I do see him the most out of everybody that's on this list. And when he's healthy, he's legit. He is in the statistics all really point to that as well. He's a top 10, maybe just outside the top 10 guy when he's on the field. The problem is he just hasn't been. I believe it was a torn Achilles in his rookie year. He was dealing with issues last year. Hasn't played a full 16-game schedule yet. The Patriots clearly believe in him. They picked up his fifth-year option. They're hoping that he can be their left tackle, which is going to be extremely important for this team, especially when Mac Jones gets in there, a young quarterback. But that offensive line is going to be pretty good, but it predicates on Isaiah Wynn. So that one was a little bit tough because there's a world where he's a top 10 tackle, but like you don't want to project too much either. So that was a little bit tough.
Yeah, Wynn has just played 18 games in his career.
Right.
They've already picked up his fifth-year option. He's 3 years into it. They clearly appreciate his talent, and when he's on the field, he's very good. But if he's not, you can't make a guy a top 10 tackle until he is on the field.
Exactly.
I would probably argue that Mekhi Becton should have made the list. Is that crazy to say that he should have made the list? He was awesome last year.
No, he was great. And so for me, it's, a lot of factors go at play, but like a lot of these guys are really good. It's like you were saying, it's a tough position to kind of figure out here. So to me, I didn't want to just completely react too much on rookie seasons. Now,
Sure.
Just to pull the curtain, Tristan Wirfs is a guy that's inside this top 10 list, but we're talking about a guy in Wirfs who was almost historic in his rookie season. So I'm trying not to be too reactionary either, because I think that's a little bit disrespectful to the guys that have put together a body of work. Someone who has been in the league for a little bit and has really kind of solidified himself as a top tackle or a top 10 tackle in the league. Like, for example, Bowles, I mean, for me, he's a guy who was probably, a solid tackle prior to this past year, but the big issue for him was penalties, and it was really hamstringing his career.
Tons of them.
It was I believe it was almost historic in the terms of how much he was compiling over the first few years of his career, but he was able to bring that down. And to me, his numbers were fantastic. So he was more well-rounded, wasn't hurting the team with penalties. And when you do that and you were already considered pretty good, that's going to put you in the top 10 for me. And I'm hedging a little bit because I only put him at 10, but his numbers, I mean, are just ridiculous. I mean, I believe it was only Trent Williams and David Bakhtiari who had the only higher PFF grades. So to me, like, we're talking about statistically in terms of PFF's grading system, a top 3 tackle. I'm putting him at number 10 because I don't know if this penalty, reduction is something where he turned the corner, or if it's just kind of a blip in the radar and he goes back. So to me, that's kind of why we're sneaking him into the top 10 here and leaving those guys out.
Yeah, I believe in 2017, 2018, and 2019, he was, I think, the only player in the NFL to record double-digit penalties. There's holdings and, mostly holdings, false starts, et cetera. I believe, largely. And, so yes, a heavily penalized guy who was taken early in the draft, who hadn't really, lived up to expectations, and all of a sudden breaks out with a new contract for his best year of his career at the age of 28. He's 29 now, going into the 2021 season. And it is also possible that, depending on, maybe Drew Lock can take a step forward. Maybe it's Teddy Bridgewater, who's potentially an easier quarterback to play for, just because of the sort of the way that he plays the game and the cautious nature that he plays with. Maybe that makes it a little bit easier. Maybe they trade for Aaron Rodgers, and all of a sudden Garrett Bowles is a top 5 offensive lineman, and we'll see how it plays out. But I don't think it's unreasonable to have him there, especially considering the guys that are just off the list. Orlando Brown, one more guy who was left off. He got traded this offseason and is moving from right tackle to left tackle. I feel pretty confident he'll be fine at left tackle because that's where he wants to play. It's where he played in college, and he's playing for the Chiefs and Andy Reid. So I'm not particularly worried about it. But that's a pretty big leap of faith to assume that he's just going to magically transition from right to left without any sort of hiccups in year one.
Right. And to his credit, he did play a lot of left tackle last year for Baltimore when Stanley went down. So, he does have the experience going over there. But like you're saying,
new team, new position,
exactly.
Whole new
there's a lot of newness to there. And especially, talking about Kansas City, it's an almost entirely new offensive line. So it's not like he's going into a cohesive unit where he's the only guy that has to kind of get with the program. They're all trying to figure it out there. And I think they will. I think it's going to be a solid offensive line in Kansas City, but that is something that would give you pause here. And certainly someone who is a candidate to jump up into this top 10 if he shows us that he can maintain what he did during that time on the blind side in Baltimore. If he can bring that to Kansas City, I mean, we're not only talking about him being a top 10 guy, but I mean, Kansas City, once again, being one of those legit powerhouses in the AFC, if not, the favorite to win the Super Bowl.
No question about it. Taylor Moton checks in at number 9 for you, and he has just always been a right tackle, right? Yeah. He's just a right tackle. That's where they play him. They know what he works. Nice draft pick for Carolina. They've held on to him. They franchise tagged him, and he improved substantially in the run game last year, even with maybe I don't want to say a questionable offense, but an offense. They lost Christian McCaffrey. That doesn't help your run game, and now. They beef up the offensive line. They still have Greg Little there, who they took in 2019 as a second rounder. Maybe not even going to make the roster. Brady Christensen they drafted this year in the 3rd round, and then they signed Cameron Irving. So Moton's going to anchor that right side. If Sam Darnold comes in and is an upgrade at the quarterback position, if Christian McCaffrey is healthy, it stands to reason that Moton is going to justify this spot.
Exactly. And there's a reason, why Carolina franchised them. They need some stability on that offensive line, especially when they're bringing in a new quarterback in Darnold. And one thing that you can say about him, too, is he is reliable. He is someone who, to this point in his career, has been there for you. I believe he's made like 48 straight starts. I'm just reading that off my story. Like, he's been a legitimate, anchor to that side. And that's part of the biggest thing. I mean, like I was just saying with Isaiah Wynn, the only reason why he's not on this list, he has all the ability, but he can't stay on the field. When we move over here now, it's a guy that you can almost lock in every single week, and he's only allowed 10 sacks throughout his career, according to PFF. So, I mean, you're talking about someone who's not going to really shoot you in the foot and will always be there. That has the makings to me as a back-end top 10 guy in the NFL. And again, like I was saying earlier, are there left tackles that maybe should be, inside the top 10? This is an example of us throwing a right tackle in there to kind of balance this list out to have a more complete offensive line ranking. Yeah.
And again, you got to have right tackles in there. You can't just have the top 10 left tackles. You need to, so maybe Taylor Moton's not, better than Garrett Bowles. I mean, maybe he is, but it's tough. You have to sort of
kind of weigh it differently.
It's like when Prisco does his top 100. It's not just the top. It's not the top 10 aren't just quarterbacks. Right. I mean, they would be if you were doing positional value, but you got to strip that out and kind of figure that.
If we were drafting, it would be totally different.
Correct. Yes. At number 8, Jack Conklin, who was a fantastic signing by the Cleveland Browns was it last offseason or 2 off seasons ago?
Last offseason. First year in Cleveland.
The Titans actually drafted him in the 1st round and then didn't use the 5th-year option on him, and then couldn't sign him to a new contract because they had a bunch of guys popping up at the same time, let him walk into free agency. The Titans scoop him up. The Browns scoop him up, drop him in at right tackle there. And in Kevin Stefanski's offense, it was perfect. And Conklin was fantastic and helped sort of be one of the motors that got the offense, that got that run game going. And that's why he finds his way on this list.
And I'll tell you this about Conklin. And to me, this whole Cleveland Browns offensive line was really tough. This isn't the first Brown this is the first Brown we're going to talk about, but not the only one, because this offensive line is probably going to be the best in the NFL next year, or at least it's going to be in the conversation. They were last year, in that conversation of being one of the better units in the league. So it is tough to kind of figure out, okay, how much is it him and how much of it is him just feeding off the skill of other players around him. I mean, that's part of the offensive line. That's what makes offensive line great. You can't just have one stud left tackle, even if you have that. We've seen in other teams that doesn't really translate to overall success on the line. So to me, Conklin is legit. He's a top 10 tackle in this league, clearly. And he's had a top 10 overall grade over the past few years here. I believe he was a top 10. He was top 15. He was one of the only guys who was a top 15 graded in pass protection and in run blocking. So you're talking about a well-rounded guy here as well. It was a smash signing for them last year. And it's kind of, bleeding into this offseason where the Browns are just continuing to make savvy moves, not huge splashes, but they are just they're pushing the right buttons for them to now be one of the teams that we're looking at and saying, could they make a leap here? Could they kind of make a bump up in the AFC? And when you have a guy like Baker Mayfield in Kevin Stefanski's offense, and now this whole unit is going into year 2 of that coaching staff, it's exciting to see what they're going to do.
It's pretty wild that Conklin's career path, he was an all-pro his rookie season. It was his best season ever with the Titans, and he basically declined, not every single year, only played 9 games in 2018. But they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. That is wild that they would let him.
And I don't really know if there was a great reasoning for it.
I think they just thought it was sort of a flash in the pan his rookie season. By the way, I count 6 of the actually no, it's more than that because Sheldon Rankins has changed team. The 2016 draft it's really weird. It's full of studs. You have Joey Bosa, Jalen Ramsey, Ronnie Stanley, DeForest Buckner, Jack Conklin, Laremy Tunsil. The top 15 really, and they basically all changed teams. The only guy, Carson Wentz, Jared Goff, all changed teams. Bosa, Zeke Elliott, and Ronnie Stanley, I count as the only 3 guys drafted in the top 15 of that draft with really good players, multiple All-Pros who haven't changed teams. Just an odd fact.
Musical chairs there.
Yeah, very bizarre. But yeah, and now he pops back up in his first year with the Browns and is excellent. It seems like the scheme fits him really well. They want him. He is good at exactly what they are asking him to do.
Perfect.
And that's why he pops up there on your list. Number 7, Tristan Wirfs, a second-year player now for the Buccaneers. Maybe, I mean, nobody's going to say that Tristan Wirfs was more important than Tom Brady. That would be dumb. But I don't know that they win the Super Bowl without Tristan Wirfs.
Well, I don't know if they win the Super Bowl without that draft class last year as well. I mean, you're talking about Wirfs. I mean, that was, those 2 in particular, slam dunk selections and ones that they needed to make. The Buccaneers traded up to go get Wirfs. They clearly knew that they had a need. They addressed it. They were cashing in on this Tom Brady signing as soon as humanly possible and surrounding him with young talent. And they've done it tremendously. I mean, they have a Lombardi trophy sitting in there. And so for me, Wirfs was, we're talking about the Super Bowl and all of that. He was the highest graded player according to PFF in that game. And he was just absolutely sensational throughout the year. I believe he only allowed 1 sack throughout the year with 769 pass blocking attempts. I mean, you're talking about a guy who completely was able to splash into the league and really have no huge hiccups. That for a rookie is almost unheard of when we're talking about offensive line play, which is why we were saying earlier, like, yeah, Mekhi Becton, he's phenomenal. He should get in this list at some point in his career. He didn't do what Wirfs did. He didn't do that. He did not do it on the stage that he was at. And some of that's just opportunity. Could Mekhi Becton have done what Wirfs done in Tampa Bay? Absolutely. But
sure.
The opportunity just never presented itself. It did for Wirfs, and he just absolutely ran with it. So that's what's huge.
Playing right tackle for the Bucs with Tom Brady as your quarterback, and you have a really good offensive line on the interior with Ali Marpat, Ryan Jensen, Alex Kappa, and of course Donovan Smith on the other side. I mean, that makes life a lot easier than just being the new guy on the left side for Sam Darnold and Adam Gase's offense. So it's a totally different situation. But I agree. I mean, Wirfs earned this ranking 100%. At 6, mentioned 2016 draft class, Laremy Tunsil, famously the leak of the bong, the gas mask bong on draft night, didn't matter. Still went in the first round, I think 13th overall. Is that right? 13th overall? Yes, 13th overall to the Dolphins. Eventually traded for a massive amount of draft picks to the Houston Texans, the highlight of Bill O'Brien and Jack Easterby's reign thus far in Houston. If Laremy Tunsil was on a better team and hadn't been traded for all those picks, and then hadn't bent Bill O'Brien and Jack Easterby over a barrel and gotten like $5 million over market, that he would just be considered a great player. But it's almost like he's dinged because the Texans front office is incompetent.
Right. And so this is kind of when I was constructing this top 10, he was much lower. And then I kind of was like, wait a minute, he's a fantastic player. Like, I'm thinking I even, note it in the story, like, he's most known right now, I think, for the trade from Miami, where it's just completely
trade
blown
number
up.
one, beer bong or gas mask bong number 2.
Which is remarkable.
He's a great player. He's just a great player.
He's very, very talented, and it's a shame that it's his, not only has his career just been weird. I mean, from draft night on, all of the outside things around him have been absolutely bizarre. Whether it's the gas mask on draft night, the trade that is really not his fault. It's actually a credit to how talented he is that they were able to surrender up that much, and then he gets to a Houston team that is just absolutely collapsing in on itself from every which way. But again, that doesn't take away from him being one of the better tackles in the NFL. I mean, so that's kind of where I was like, okay, if I just take all of this out and use player X and I just list everything about him, he is cracking into the top. He's knocking on the door of a top 5 tackle in the league. So I was like, okay, you know what? The picks be damned, Houston be damned. He's got to be higher on this list than what I was originally going to put him at.
Yeah, a better pass blocker than he is a run blocker.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, we talk about he blew Trent Williams and David Bakhtiari, and we'll get to them in a minute. They can thank Laramie Tunsil and his negotiating skills because he doesn't have an agent. It was just him and Bill O'Brien in the room talking. He took the top of the market. It was Ronnie Stanley at 19.75, took it up to $22 million per year. Bakhtiari then signed for $23 million a year, and then Trent Williams signed for $23 million, $10,000 per year, which is a very clear, hey, I just need to be the top paid tackle in the market. Those guys can thank Laramie Tunsil for doing it, because otherwise they might go 20 in 2010 or something like that.
And just to get a little bit more specific with Tunsil, I mean, Houston's offense is a little bit more difficult for tackles. I mean, he does have to do a little bit moving around. Deshaun Watson, when he was there, he's a guy that's going to dance around the pocket a little more. He's going to try to extend the play with his legs, which puts more pressure along the offensive line. Like we were saying earlier, if Watson was just a step back, first, second read guy, Tunsil's job is tremendously easier. But when Watson starts to dance, he starts to move around. And that could even be the case this year with Tyrod Taylor as well. If he's waiting for his receivers to separate or for something to break down so he can make a play with his legs, that's asking a lot for your offensive lineman, and particularly your blindside tackle in Tunsil. So that's another reason why he's higher on this list than I think a lot of people would originally think. Ronnie
Stanley at number 5. Also a member of that 2016 draft class. Pretty good.
Yeah, we're talking about a guy who I think I had him as number 2 last year. I don't necessarily remember, but he's legitimately
games, lost to a nasty ankle injury, was awesome before it, basically.
Exactly. And so that's why you get pegged down a little bit. I don't want to completely erase you from the top 10 just because you got hurt, but you were still playing at a high level at the time that you went down. So I'm not going to just be like, you're completely disqualified. That's ridiculous. But you're going to go down from 2 to 5. I think that's a fair dip for a guy like Stanley, who we all know if he returns to full form, he'll jump right back up. A guy like Trent Williams last year was lower on the list because we just hadn't seen what he was able to do for a year. But then we're moving him up. We'll talk about him in a minute. Like, he's somebody who we're moving up because we've seen him put a body of work. He was able to bounce back after not playing. And so if we're sitting here next year, well, God willing, I'm sure Stanley, if he's healthy, he'll be right back up here inside the top 3.
I would agree with that completely. Was it Ronnie Stanley, Quentin Nelson, Mike McGlinchey, all in the same offensive line in 2015 Notre Dame? I think it was.
That's pretty good.
Because they stomped. I'm pretty sure we went up to Notre Dame and saw them play NC State in Notre Dame, and they just, we had a really good defense, and they ran all over us. Maybe it was 2016. Anyway, very good defense, very good offensive line. And Ronnie Stanley, one of the anchors of it, and he's lived up to the hype in the NFL. If he's healthy, you're right. He'll probably be a top 2, top 3. We'll see, how it goes out. But certainly, and particularly as strong as he is in the run game, where you can just put people in the ground for what they do with Lamar Jackson and that run in all the varied rushing attacks, he helps a ton.
It's very similar to Jack Conklin, where it's like, perfectly situated with his team. That is a perfect match for what he's able to do with them.
I actually wonder. So Ronnie Stanley played, what did we say, 6 games?
I believe so. Yes, he suffered. He went down in week 8. So probably if there's a bye in there somewhere.
Yeah. So the bye was week 7. So the Ravens started 5-1, with their only loss being to the Chiefs in week 3, and after their bye, they went 1-4 before ripping off 5 straight wins. As they sort of that might not be a coincidence.
And the other thing as well, I mean, we're talking about his run game as well, but again, PFF's rankings, he was the top pass blocking tackle in the league at the time he went down.
Yep.
He's as good as they come. It's just injuries trickle you down a little bit.
Sure, for sure. At number 4, Terran Armstead of the Saints, who will now be blocking for somebody.
Jameis Winston. You see those workouts?
Actually, we'll do 4 and 3 together because you have Armstead and Ryan Ramczyk at 4 and 3. You think it's Jameis?
Yeah, right. I mean, he's doing those workouts where he's getting beat up, going around. I don't know what was going on. He's got I don't know. I believe it was just the main CBS Instagram account where it was highlighting all of Winston's workouts, and they are just wild. I mean, I thought Aaron Donald, playing around with knives was crazy. Winston's doing some oddball stuff, but hey, if you got him to a number 1 overall pick, so I'm sure it's working to some degree.
And by the way, the reason why you think the Jameis the reason why in my mind you want to go with Jameis over Taysom Hill is that you do have these 2 tackles in Terran Armstead and Ryan Ramczyk who have been awesome. I mean, Ramczyk was part of. I mean, I think he's missed maybe 1 game, and he could have sat out for that game. I'm not entirely sure. Since he was drafted as part of that legendary 2017 draft class for the Saints with Marshall Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk, and then Alvin Kamara along with Marcus Williams. So it was just changed the entire direction of the franchise with that draft class. And if you have that kind of offensive line and you can coach the turnovers out of Jameis, you can win with him. It almost feels like a waste to use Taysom Hill.
Yeah, it changes the whole dynamic of what Winston can do. I mean, you're talking about not being under pressure. We talk about a lot about like Joe Burrow, for example. A guy coming into a new system. I know Winston's not a rookie, but he's taking on a new system in a new town. And you're asking him to do all these things, get a feel for his new weapons, get a feel for the NFL, get a feel for all this stuff. But his offensive line is completely falling, apart around him, and he gets hurt, and he can't even really figure anything out. Winston was under pressure a lot in Tampa Bay as well. I mean, I know we're talking a lot about how great Tampa Bay's offensive line was with Brady, but it wasn't particularly great over the last few years of Winston. He had a great interior. I mean, Marpat was great. Jensen. I mean, a lot of those guys were solid, but he still was under pressure a lot. Now in New Orleans, there's at least an opportunity where you have your top 2 tackles, which is the best tackle duo in the NFL. There's really no excuses for you to hold the ball. Even if you hold the ball a little bit too long, you should be able to figure some things out and limit those turnovers there. So, it's a great opportunity for Winston. He's got, as solid of a tackle duo as you can ask for in the NFL. If he ends up being the guy, I'm with you. I think if they throw Taysom Hill in there, it'd be an absolute waste. But, Ramczyk, he's been absolutely healthy throughout his entire career. I think he's only played 95%, 95% of the snaps throughout his career. That's as few as it's ever gone throughout a season. And when you talk about Armstead, I think it was, where is it now? I have it right here. 4.1% of the time he's allowed pressure. That's it throughout his entire career. Every time in pass blocking situations. I mean, that's just, it's insane. I mean, but that's what we're talking about here and why it's so crazy to try to, figure out who goes on top of who. I mean, we're talking about like decimal points in how great they are at protecting the quarterback and helping in the run game. It's a fraction. It's coming down to that fraction. So again, New Orleans, they have nothing to worry about at the tackle positions right now heading into 2021. They're set for a little bit.
The top 2 guys we mentioned earlier is the top 2 contracts for offensive tackles. Trent Williams at number 2 and David Bakhtiari at number 1. Look, I mean, we don't have to dwell on it long. Trent Williams should have been the comeback player of the year last year, as I declared, but Alex Smith, of course, wanted. Williams is an awesome signing, an awesome trade, for the 49ers. and then he goes out there and just destroys dudes in an offense he's very comfortable in. He just knows the offense, and he's a perfect fit for it because he's so fast on his feet. He's a punishing blocker, lethal in the run game, and a great pass protector as well. You would have to, I mean, he is a critical piece of what the 49ers want to do. Now they had Alex Mack. That offensive line should be even better. And then David Bakhtiari, widely praised as, one of the best, maybe the best tackle in all of football. You have it number one. He's been the blindside protector for Aaron Rodgers, and that's not an easy job. We talked to Jordy Nelson about how Aaron Rodgers likes to work with receivers, but the same applies to the tackle, because you have to know that Rodgers does that. He checks his progressions. He does that backwards little spin rollout. So you have to learn how to protect him and how to be an elite pass blocker. The loss of Corey Linsley is kind of a concern, I think. But, as long as when Bakhtiari went down, it was like, whoa, that's a bigger deal than Devontae Adams. I mean,
yeah, absolutely huge. And I'm glad we're doing these two guys together, because it's really like 1A, 1B. I mean, they are the top tier of tackles. And Stanley could get in here, like we were saying earlier. But like right now, it's these two guys in the top two tiers. And the only reason why I have Bakhtiari as the number one guy is because he's better in pass protection right now. I mean, grading wise and all of that. And like you were saying with Rodgers, there's a little bit more movement there. I think it's a little bit more of a wild card. I think Shanahan, it's a little bit more designed. You know exactly what's going to happen. The bootlegs are supposed to go that way. Rodgers, he's going to dance around a little bit more. He's not particularly like, Lamar Jackson or anything like that, but he is going to put a little bit more stress on the offensive line than whoever is going to be under center for the San Francisco 49ers. So that's again, the only reason why he's going up. But Bakhtiari now, it's going to be interesting how, where we're going to rank him this time next year. Is he going to be blocking for Aaron Rodgers? He's going to be taking on a lot more responsibility if it's Jordan Love. I mean, you're talking about a young first-year starter trying to figure his way out. There's a lot of pressure that goes on an offensive line when you have a young quarterback like that. We've seen it with Joe Burrow. We saw it with Tua last year. When they're under duress, it just leads to non-winning plays, to losing football games. And so for a team that's been in the NFC Championship for the last few years now, knocking on the door of a Super Bowl, Bakhtiari is important if Rodgers is there to get them over that hump. But it's also important for the development of Love if he's the guy. So it's a pivotal year for him there. And I'm not saying that he's going to like fall off if he's, if they don't have a great year, he's going to fall off the top 10 spot. I don't want to put too much pressure on team success. But it is an interesting year for him, more so than even Williams, who I know that they're in a quarterback change too, but that's a little bit more by design. Like Kyle Shanahan will make the decision between Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance. But this one with Green Bay, it's going to be kind of force-fed onto them if Rodgers really sticks to his guns. Yeah, agreed completely. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, the top 10 interior offensive linemen. We got a little more detailed, I think, than Debo expected when he signed me up for this birthday podcast, Sully. But you did a great job of the tackles. And now let's dive into the guys on the interior. We can kind of beat through them a little quicker. Frank Ragnall checks in at number 10 for you. Maybe some surprising action for him here, right? I mean, come on now. And this guy like fractures his throat throughout the year and still plays. I mean, come on, you got to give him. I feel like I am obligated to put him in this list. But no, I mean, that game was unbelievable because I don't believe he gave up a sack, a pressure, or anything. He fractured throat. I mean, that's just, I don't even want to know what that feels like. I like if I have a night of drinking and my throat is sore the next day, I feel like I'm going to be I'm dead. So I can only imagine what that is. But he's someone who is one of the best at his position. This is, again, we're starting into the interior lineman. You're going to get a little bit more of a not just left guards and all of that. It's going to be a little bit more of a collection. And so to me, I think he was the second highest rated player at his position going into last year outside of Linsley. So to me, you got to, represent that a little bit more than just, always an honorable mention. No. He's tough as nails. 10 left guards on here. You got to have. Right. Yeah. So who's the toughest? Just to look at honorable mention guys on the interior, Ryan Kelly from the Colts, Brandon Brooks from the Eagles, J.C. Treader, Jason Kelsey. So plenty of centers on there. And you have 3 centers on this list, and we'll get to them, but you can't go. You also can't have 7 centers. Exactly. I don't want to, there's a balancing. I can't go overload. Correct. At number 9, Wyatt Teller of the Cleveland Browns. Sensing a theme here with the Cleveland Browns. I know, and so the Browns, again, they're probably going to have the top offensive line in the NFL this year, or at least on paper they are as talented as they should be. And when you look at Teller, he was the one that I thought was a little bit more interesting, because when I'm trying to figure out, obviously I'm looking at PFF, I'm looking at their grades, I'm trying to stack everybody up like you would go on Pro Football Reference. It's the same type of thing. They're just one of the best to give you the offensive line stuff.
Yeah.
And you look at his leap last year. I mean, he had a 32, in their grading system, 36.2 points higher than it was the previous year. I mean, that is just a phenomenal jump. And he only played 11 games, so you got to kind of, ding him for that. But when he was able to play in those games, the Browns were able to rush for over 115 yards on the ground. They averaged 178.6 yards rushing. And when he was sidelined, that number fell to 81.7 per game. So, I mean, I think Nick Chubb really likes him. I think that Kareem Hunt really likes when he's on the field. So to me, when you have somebody who has made that big of a swing in a year, and again, you don't want to get too into the 1 year pops, but that's something that you have to at least highlight. That's notable.
Yeah. And look, it's also easier sometimes. You look at this offensive line, they draft Jedrick Wills in the first round last year. You have, we mentioned J.C. Tretter, just an honorable mention. Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin, both guys on the list. And of course, Joel Bitonio, who we'll get to in a second. I mean, it's easier when you're on an offensive line full of good offensive linemen to be a great offensive lineman. And that's not, the fault of anyone else. It's just how it works. Rodney Hudson traded this offseason. Is he the only guy? Yeah, he's the only former Raider to make this list. They got rid of Gabe Jackson as well, but Rodney Hudson now at the Cardinals, switching teams. So new setup. We kind of dinged Orlando Brown a little bit for that, but you felt compelled to put Rodney Hudson in there anyway.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a little bit easier, and Kyler Murray, the Cardinals offense is probably a little bit more complex just because he's going to be running around a little bit more. But we're talking about a guy who's played in the league. I think he's only allowed 3 sacks since 2015. I mean, that's just insane for a guy of his caliber. I was confused at the time why the Raiders decided to make this move.
Everybody was. They're like, is Rodney Hudson bad? No, he was good.
No, he's really good. He's a good tackle. Kyler Murray should be very happy about this addition. I think he should be happy about this addition more so than like AJ Green and JJ Watt. I mean, this is one that I think is going under the radar a little bit because, I mean, admittedly, when your team gets AJ Green and JJ Watt and Rodney Hudson, we all know who you're going to talk about. You're not going to talk about Rodney Hudson, but he might be the most important.
The Rodney Hudson Instagram post.
Right.
JJ Watt Instagram post. But I mean, in all seriousness, I've always long maintained that you need to have a really good veteran center, quality center that you can pair with your young quarterback. And this is what Hudson gives them, for Kyler Murray. And that's sort of what Kyler Murray needs, especially maybe when you're trying to run maybe more tempo offense. You need somebody who is comfortable. He'll have to learn a new offense, of course. But this offensive line started to come together for the Cardinals. And if you're going to be bullish on them, Hudson should be a very big reason. So I don't disagree with the ranking at all there. Ali Marpat of the Buccaneers, the former. I don't know if you wrote this in the story. Can you name what college Ali Marpat went to?
I can tell you, it's Hobart. I know exactly. My buddy who played at WPI, he played against them. He never lets us live it down. He's like, I played against NFL talent. Okay, man.
You played Hobart, buddy. Marpat. So I was at the combine. He was 2000. He was drafted in 2015. So I was at that combine in 2015 when there was some buzz leading into it. Like, watch out for this kid from Hobart, Ali Marpat, young, small school prospect who might sort of move up the rankings. I mean, he blew the combine away, shoots up into the second round, drafted by the Buccaneers. And we mentioned several Buccaneers on this podcast and other top 10 episodes. It's not because they won the Super Bowl. Credit to Jason Light. He's done a really good job drafting for the Buccaneers. He's been killed, because of the Roberto Aguayo stuff and a couple of James Winston didn't work out, but he has done a good job drafting. And Ali Marpat's just another example.
And one of the things, it's kind of weird. Like, I'm dinging some guys because they weren't on the field, like Stanley and stuff like that. But when you play 13 games like Marpat did, we do kind of get an interesting sample of like, how is the team with you and how is the team without you? And when he was able to play this year, their passer rate or their completion percentage was up over 7%. I mean, that is a pretty substantial change for a guy like that, especially with Brady and everybody. I mean, like we were saying with Wirfs, this offensive line is pretty solid. They wouldn't have been able to win the Super Bowl without that unit being as good as it was. I believe that they were third as a unit in the NFL in adjusted sack rate. So like they were keeping a 43-year-old quarterback off the ground, which is all you really need. When you sign him to a 2-year deal to kind of take you to a Super Bowl. Last thing you need is for him to have be running for his life for a guy that isn't mobile. So they put all the pieces together, and Marpet's been one of those guys for a while now. That's been a pretty good anchor for them.
Yeah, and when they brought Ryan Jensen in, they'd had Marpet at center. They originally had him at right guard, I think, when they drafted him, and then they moved him to center. And the last 3 years, he's been at left guard. He can play over the line. He can probably play tackle even if you needed him to in a pinch. But his play has elevated the most since they got him into that left guard position. He's gotten comfortable there, and it's made a world of difference. I don't think they don't win the Super Bowl without that defense.
Right.
Again, I'm not trying to ding Tom Brady. But they don't win the Super Bowl without that defense, and they don't win the Super Bowl without that offensive line.
Yeah.
That's just.
I mean, look at the other side of that Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes at this moment better than Tom Brady talent-wise, but he was running for his life because the offensive line just couldn't let him establish anything.
Exactly, which we should really skip. I don't want to skip over Joel Bitonio, but we talked about the Browns already.
Right. He allowed, I believe, 0 sacks last year. So right. he's very good. Very good.
You're awesome. Sorry, Joel Bitonio. You are fantastic, and you deserve all the accolades. But the segue leads us to Joe Thuney, former Patriots player, former NC State player, who now will be trying to protect Patrick Mahomes after the Chiefs went out and made a huge splash in free agency to land him. Thuney's a stud, man. Yep. I know that the Patriots just probably, well, I guess they could have afforded to. They tried to keep him, didn't they? And he felt like the situation was maybe better in KC. I mean, you're blocking for Patrick Mahomes and working with Andy Reid. How is it not exactly what you want? Exactly.
I mean, and this is a guy in Thuney who's seen contention year after year in New England, not last year, obviously, but he was here when they were competing for Super Bowls with Tom Brady. He has rings to his name. He certainly wants to continue that.
His first 3 years or something crazy like that.
He's been a key piece to that offensive line for, I think, at least 2 Super Bowls. And so, you go into Kansas City, that's not a bad move at all. Patrick Mahomes is going to be, they are the new New England in that category. Like, you're going to be contending every year. You'll be in the conversation. One of the best, if not the best coach quarterback duo in the NFL. And you're going to be a key fixture of protecting him, just like you did Tom Brady all those years. And he's been great. I mean, you've seen him, but like over the last 3 years, allowed 3 sacks. So 1 sack a year that he's accounted for. I mean, he's just one of the game's best left guards, somebody that I've seen up close and personal. And just quickly, for the reasons, New England didn't go after him, I believe that they did try to bring him back to some degree, but they're also at the time trying to figure out what's going on with David Andrews, the center there. He was able to re-sign. They also have Michael Onwenu, who's coming in. He's someone who is just in my just missed category for the interior lineman. He's going to start for them, I believe, this year at left guard, and he was someone who was just insane. He was able to move around all the offensive line like Thuney almost. So I think that there's a lot of confidence in him, and when you're getting into the $80 million range for Thuney and you have this young guy coming in, I think that was part of the motivation there as well. Again, they like Thuney. Thuney's fantastic, but I think that was probably part of it as well.
Oh, I just ran into one. Oh, Greg Rosenthal. Greg Rosenthal actually ranked it as one of the worst deals in free agency.
Beautiful. All right.
the deal that Thuney got from the Chiefs. You know what though? That ranks.
I mean, that's a lot of money. I don't know.
That's a Patriots fan hating on Thuney Bolton Town. That's what that is. Rosenthal.
That could be
friend of the good friend of the show. I'm just kidding. Greg's the best. I love Greg. But you look at what the Patriots did this offseason, and with the offensive line they have and the lack of weapons that they had, it's clear that when they got into the free agency market, they were interested in Thuney, but the Chiefs were willing to just go higher, and so they focused their efforts on Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, et cetera, and Judon, all those guys. Instead,
well, that's the thing; they had so many other needs, and if anything, one of New England's strengths is the offensive line. Like I'm just saying, you have Onwenu coming up. Hopefully, Isaiah Wynn can stay healthy. You just traded for Trent Brown. They were able to kind of piece things along, but a great offensive line is awesome. But if the quarterback has all day to throw, if there's no one to catch the ball, then it doesn't really matter. That was a big thing in New England last year. So I can understand why they maybe had to make that hard call with Thuney.
Yep. And Another offensive lineman, one who is, I believe, Brandon Scherff is playing under the franchise tag after his first All-Pro season in 2020. Number 4, the Washington All-Pro, who was drafted. He was taken in the first round. Yeah, first round, 5th overall, the 2015 draft. Scherff's been a monster for Washington. There's no way they're going to let him go, but they do have some hard discussions about. They didn't sign. Am I crazy? They didn't sign no contract, right? I didn't miss that.
No, I believe he's still. I think he's on the second franchise tag. If I'm pretty sure,
he is on the second franchise tag.
I believe that's true.
Yeah.
And so again, when we're getting, and now we're inside the top 5. This is splitting hairs here. We're talking about some of the best players in the world at what they do. And when you look at Scherff, I mean, going back to 2018, just 5 sacks allowed in over 1,200 pass blocking situations. I mean, that's just insane. Last year he surrendered 1 sack, and I think he was called for just 1 penalty. So that is a good week. That is a good week for some offensive linemen, let alone a season. So, again, absolutely insane. Washington they almost remind me a little bit of Tampa, where it's, before Brady, where just everything around them is really, really good. Good offensive line, first rounders all along the front 7. You have Gibson in the backfield, McLaurin as a receiver. They just haven't been able to get the quarterback thing right. Fitzpatrick's there now. He'll be a good stopgap guy. But if you're like, and I know the Packers wouldn't, if Rodgers was a free agent, let's just say, I would look at Washington and say, wow, this is a very attractive situation. Whoever's the next quarterback to hit free agency, I'm looking at Washington saying, this is a pretty good offensive line. You have great players on defense. This is a little Tampa 2.0-y to me. Again, they still have to get that generational quarterback,
right.
But the pieces that have been put in place are pretty solid by Ron Rivera and everybody.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think if you look around, and you don't have to figure out what they're going to do with Scherff. And they played him at right guard. I think his whole career. He came in from day one and just played right guard and has been a beast. He's a mauler in the run game. Yeah, go ahead.
And so the only thing why he's not higher on this list, again, talent-wise he is, but he just hasn't been healthy enough. I mean, I don't think he's played a full season dating back a while now.
Since year 2016, yep.
So, it's that's, again, as talented as you can be, are you on the field every week? And you can't say that with him. So, and I bet you that's what Washington is trying to figure out right now is, all right, we like the talent when we see it, but do we really want to commit Joe Tooney money, 5 years, $80 million to a guy that, again, we don't know if he's going to be there every single week? Yeah,
and that's part of the problem too, is that, with that second franchise tag, Scherff knows that he is getting close to free agency. Yeah. He's not going to take $10 million a year. He's making $18 million this year, which is by far the most of any guard, out there. Brandon Brooks, the next right guard at 14, and Zach Martin at 14. We'll get to him in a second. And then, Tooney at 16, and then it's like Andrews Pete 11.5. So, I mean, Brandon Scherff is going to be looking for something in the range of 15 to 16 million and maybe more. And that's tough for Washington to deal with, especially a guy who's a holdover, a little bit older, has played really well. But
especially for a team that doesn't have a quarterback sorted out yet. I mean, sure. Kansas City can do that because they know they already have Patrick Mahomes locked in for the foreseeable future. Forever. I mean, forever, really. I mean, for the rest of time. If you're Washington, you still haven't even found the guy that's a rookie yet. I mean, it'd be one thing if you're like, all right, well, we're planning to, like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. We know he's the guy. We're just figuring out the extension, and then we'll hit you. They haven't even been in that position yet, so they don't know if they're getting it in free agency, getting it at the draft. They're still trying to figure that out. So I wouldn't fault them if they're a little bit weary to keep their books open just in case something shakes out.
The number 3 guy here, Corey Lindsley, the second highest paid center, a new Chargers player, and a fantastic addition. We talked about it earlier. I mean, this is just smart business. You give your young quarterback a stud center, and that is exactly what they did in bringing in Corey Lindsley. And then finally, the top 2 guys on this list, no-brainer, Zach Martin, Quentin Nelson. Quentin Nelson's just, I mean, like 2 or 3 seasons away from probably locking up a Hall of Fame career.
It's crazy, but it's a generational guy. Like it was very easy for me to go, okay, I have to do, interior offensive line rankings. Sure. Quentin Nelson, 1, done. And, that's no discredit to Martin either.
Like Aaron Donald at interior defensive line.
Exactly. And so
Quentin Nelson is great because you don't have to be some offensive line savant to figure out that he's just incredible at what he does. Anybody can watch him just blister guys, especially in the run game. He gets to the second level. He buries people. He enjoys it. He's teabagging out there, and Zach Martin's still playing at an elite level as well.
Right. And Martin too had an impressive season last year. There was so much disarray around him, whether it's, Dak Prescott, Smith going down, like,
and he only played 10 games too.
Right. So, but I mean, when he was in there, he was playing well, and it was through not the greatest of conditions. But going back to Nelson too, he's good when there's an offseason discussion of him possibly moving to left tackle, a much more important position just in the grand scheme of things. And everybody's like, why? Don't do it. This is a terrible decision. That's how good he is at what he does. Like, he is one of these guys, like you said. We might even be sitting here next year going, okay, generational talent. He's the next John Hanna. He is contending with Hanna as like the best guard that we've ever seen in the NFL, which is crazy, but like that's what we're talking about here.
But it doesn't even feel that crazy at all.
No,
right.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like it's just
saying this kind of, it sounds crazy when you're saying it, but you're like, you know what? I'm not really that worried about it. I'm sure it's gonna be true. All right, Sully, great stuff on the offensive linemen. We'll talk to you again about some safeties coming up.